that said.
Please, before you go to the next one. During that collection, they were waiting for one verse from Surah Al-Ahzab. They couldn't find someone to bring the textual witness, the evidence for it. How are they able to know one verse is remaining? Because the person who's transcribing, Zayd bin Thabit, he knew it from memory.
So you're talking about something totally different.
No.
You interrupted the conversation.
Excuse me, no.
You're talking about something.
Quran was collected 2 times compilation, during the time of Abu Bakr and during the time of Uthman, radiallahu anhum ajmain, right? First collection was to foresee the future, that the Quran doesn't get lost from the Muslim community. So what happened was this. They collected and then...
diversion tactic.
Not diversion.
Because I wasn't talking about what you're talking about. I wasn't talking about that at all.
I'm going to finish my statement. Right.
Yeah? You come in the conversation, but then you're talking about something.
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about Aisha radiallahu anha or some others who say, oh, there were some verses of suckling, for example.
And the goat eating scripture.
Hang on, you're confusing some religions together.
The goat eating scripture, that's
The goat eating is a academic memento, which is like this. Then we believe the Quran was revealed, and some of the verses was mansukh, or abrogated. Allah tells us in the Quran, because He's the one who's molding the Muslim community, and He will eventually leave the Quran after all this mansukh, the Quran that He wants us for the rest of the posterity. So there's some verses were abrogated. The abrogated verse, which was written down, as Aisha radiallahu anha say, she left it underneath her bed, and on one point a goat came and ate it. This is totally irrelevant. Why? Because the Quran is already compiled and collected in its entirety without the abrogating verses. So the Quran that got collected by the Muslim community is the Quran that we read today.
Birmingham University. I'm not going to lie. It's carbon copy. Now they use machines to find out that it was dated to the Prophet's time, not before, not after that time.
So you will find in our
there's no manuscripts before or after.
You will find in our hadith literature talking about the Quranic verses, which was like more than Surah Al-Baqarah or Imran, but we do not find it today. Why? Because we say these were revealed originally, but they were abrogated. Okay? This is abrogation of recitation. We believe in that. Because what eventually was left by the Prophet ﷺ from Allah is the Quran.
Why does something have to be abrogated? Tell me why. If God is perfect and
human is not.
Transmit is perfect.
Humans
why
not.
does it need to be abrogated?
Because humans are not perfect. So God can, for example.
But what I'm saying is, you Muslims claim that their Quran is perfect from day one to now, whatever. Yeah, it hasn't been changed. No dots, no vowels, no markers, all this kind of stuff. So if it's changed,
I can hear Jay Smith talking. I mean, this is the brainwashing that he has done. Brainwashing by Jay Smith. I have educated Jay Smith on many occasions, but he doesn't learn. What can I say?
So why does things need to be abrogated then?
Listen,
if God is perfect,
do you understand?
For all time.
I'm telling you.
No?
God gives revelation, and He can bring something similar or better to it. That's God's prerogative.
But
for example,
that means what you're saying is that God is imperfect.
If you allow me to finish,
or better.
Brother,
What
please.
does that say to you?
If you allow me to finish, the punishment for adultery, according to New Testament and according to the Old Testament, is what? There's an obligation has taken place. According to the Mosaic law, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Yeah, that's according to the Mosaic law of Moses. Upon him be peace. But according to Jesus, this law is abrogated. No Christian will implement this prescription, this punishment.
No, you wouldn't say it's abrogated. You would say it's fulfilled.
Hang on.
Jesus Christ fulfilled
Abrogation, fulfillment by abrogation. What is abrogation? Abrogation is annulment of something. So what is abrogated or annulled is the application of the law. He is totally annulled the law. The law of stoning someone to death for adultery is no longer applicable in Christianity. That's an abrogation. Are you saying God was imperfect? by changing that law to a different law now?
God didn't change it though.
Thank you. It's the people.
change it.
So God describes.
We know that God
So
didn't
now,
change it.
sisters, you realize God sends laws and guidance, and then He may substitute this with something similar or better because it's the people that need changing
But when
because
you
of
say
this.
similar or better,
That's what Allah says.
What does that entail? When you hear the word similar or better, that means that something wasn't as good in the first place.
For example, but
God is perfect.
God's brother. God's perfection doesn't mean the law He gives is something is imperfect. The law suits the purpose. For example, one of the law was given to the woman who committed fahisha, evil, sexual immorality, acts of sexual immorality, right? Their punishment was to confine them.
Yeah.
The punishment of these sexual immoral acts by the woman was to confine them in their homes until death comes to them. Yeah, that was a law. But then God then substituted this law with a different law. So that law of changing people to be confined and house arrest and until the death comes has been substituted with something else. So that's why God brings in laws. He is reforming people, and He can do that as He seems fit. So Quran, my dear sister, that the Prophet left behind is at the very end of his life. He recited the Quran from beginning to end twice in the month of Ramadan. The companions noticed something. Why twice? Why revise or recite the Quran beginning and twice? Because that was the end of his life, because that's the completion. So what he left behind is the Quran that we read today. This is the Quran that has been passed on from our teachers, from their teachers, all the way back to the Prophet. Now, how are we certain? How are we certain is this? It's like this. This is the month of Ramadan, as you know, right? If you go to my brother, excuse me, my brother, do you allow me to finish? If you allow me to demonstrate by using the month of Ramadan, if you have been to East London Mosque, for example, in Whitechapel, you would have noticed they recite the Quran from beginning to end from memory.
Which one?
As I said, one moment.
The
Quran, Jay Smith again. Hang on, brother, 1 second. The Quran, as you have,
But we don't claim the same thing that Muslims do.
brother,
We don't have that
please.
problem.
The Quran, the beauty of the Quran is this. Allah gave the Quran, and He gave this dispensation that the Quran could be recited by people who are unable to, by learning from the Prophet, in several different ways. Because among the Muslim community were young, old, weak, and feeble. They weren't able to recite certain words or phrases or even constructions in a way, because it wasn't possible for them, because Arabs had different tribes. So Allah gave Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam this rukhsa, this dispensation, this allowance to recite this Quran as He teaches them. So we know a clear example. Two individuals. Hisham bin Hakim and Omar. Two companions of the Prophet. Okay, please listen. It's very important we understand this. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Omar was visiting and he saw Hisham bin Hakim reciting in his prayer Surah Al-Furqan, Surah number 25. He immediately realized the recitation that this companion was reading is not the way he has learned from the Prophet. So what happens? He was about to stop him from prayer. He waited till he finished, and then he grabbed him. Says, "Who taught you to recite this surah like that?" He says, "The Prophet." He says, "No, the Prophet did not recite. The Prophet taught me differently." He says, "But this is how the Prophet taught me." What did they do? Did they just quarrel? He said, "No, let's go back to the Prophet." They both went to the Prophet. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "Okay, recite, Hisham. He recited exactly as he was reciting in his prayer. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Hakaza unzila. This is how it was revealed. This is how it was revealed. And then he told Omar, you recite. And he recited.
Okay, but we're preaching now.
Wait, no.
We're preaching now. We're preaching.
Try to understand. It's not preaching, please. I'm giving you a historical reference.
All right,
then
why did Uthman burn all the Quran?
I'll tell you in a second. I will, no problem. God willing. Now, to finish this story, or the historical narration, Umar recited and the Prophet said, it was revealed like that. Clearly, both of the recitation they recited, they had recognizable differences. So we know from our traditions of the Quran transmission, Quran reading, we call it qira'at. There are certain differences. There are differences in terms of how we recite words. There are even differences whether it's a singular or plural word. There are even differences of addition of a particular letter, like wa wassa and wa awsa. We know that Prophet ﷺ recited in both ways. Both of them are the readings of the Quran. We don't say, listen,
King.
Malik and Malik, two different words, but both readings are correct. They are both correct, authentic readings that Allah gave to Prophet ﷺ. So this is one Quran which can be read in multiple ways, which the Prophet taught us. So it's not 26 Qurans. We have several authentic readings.
It's about the claim that you make. It's about the claim that you make.
What do we make?
If something is authentic and it hasn't been changed, and it's the same, why is there different readings? Why is there different reading that side? Cairo is a different one.
Listen.
People inserting words into the Quran.
Hang on. Inserting words. Again, another brainwashing by.
Last week, they showed you. J. Smith.
Again, hang on. This we can talk about.
See it. You have to look at it in Cairo.
Here.
In the other museum.
Last week they were talking about this book. When they're talking about this book, what a childish attempt to demonstrate Quran not being preserved. This book even demonstrates the Quran is preserved.
It's not even the book. It's the actual Quran. It's not the actual Quran, because that could be interpreted whatever.
This Quran we're talking about.
That's in Cairo. The one that's in
yes.
Was it Yemen or where?
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. So Dan Brubaker unfortunately didn't do his homework very well.
How did I get all this?
My sister, to finish the example. So you said about why do we make claims? We make claims that there is only one Quran that can be read in multiple ways.
That's a different claim than you made before.
What claim did I make?
That's a different claim than Muslims made before.
What claim did you make?
It's 100% from Muhammad to his the scribes, and it's always been the same, and it always is the same. But it reads differently in different places, different vowels, different markers.
Try to understand something.
Dots, different words.
Try to understand as I said.
Maliki, all
you
that
see,
kind of stuff.
that's the problem with not understanding what our claims are. No, I'm saying that is the problem with not understanding what the Muslim claims are. If you have a strawman argument, not yourself, J. Smith and others, it's just misunderstanding. Muslims from day one have been transmitting the Quran with these 7 or 10 authentic readings. Today you can go. Listen, let me tell you what I mean by 7 or 10.
Reading is different.
Akhi.
Reading is different.
Excuse me.
They don't change their meaning.
My brother, if you allow me, I will explain, right? As I said,
contradictory to what Muslims claim.
No, Muslims, listen, Muslims,
Christians don't claim that, Muslims do.
My sister, listen, Muslims from day one has never claimed there was one reading. Subhanallah, akhi.
If you will give the Bible
brother,
to an Indian or to a
excuse me,
French
my
guy,
brother.
he will read it differently.
My brother, would you allow me to explain? Thank you. So sister, Muslims from day one have never made a claim there was one reading of the Quran. To this day, you have Quran memorization schools which teaches all this sab'ah plus other 4, 10 authentic qira'at, mutawatir. To this day. Right? So, there is one Quran. Yeah, the Quran, one script of the Quran can be read in those 10 authentic readings. Yep, we can demonstrate that.
You know where the differences are, but
I just told you.
Teach it for the camera, so.
No, I'm not doing it for camera. I'm speaking to you. I'm just showing you. Don't be brainwashed by certain people.
I'm not brainwashed.
So, for example,
I'm not brainwashed.
these insertions and so on,
Yeah.
he told you, what do they prove?
They prove that the Quran is not 100% like it was supposed to be.
Okay.
Why would you insert the name Allah?
Okay.
Where it's not supposed to be? Why is that there?
Okay. If I told you that this is only a scribal error, what would you say?
I would say prove it.
Good. If I bring you manuscripts from the same time period and before, and this has the word of Allah, and this odd one is the odd one out, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? If I have 10 manuscripts which has the word Allah in it, and one manuscript by mistake which drops it, which one are you going to take? The one which is a scribal omission, or the 10 which has the word of Allah? From the same period or earlier?
But these are your most valuable, your sacred texts.
I'm telling you,
So
if I
why
were to
would-
give
why
you,
would they be tampered with?
it's not tampered with.
Yeah. The
Manuscripts.
ink is darker and everything. You got it in the book.
You didn't
got it
realize.
in the book.
You need to understand one thing. Manuscripts, when they're written by hand, no Muslims claim that they are any scribal error free. Scribes make mistakes and they get corrected often.
Okay.
Sometimes they're left right.
That's what Muslims need to correct, because when they make their claims, they make 100% claim that the Quran is 100% from the time it was transmitted to now is the same. Nothing changed.
Hang on.
Do you understand? That's what they make claims.
Listen.
Muslims' claims need to change.
Brother,
Do you understand? The claims that they
what
make.
you need to understand is this.
Yeah.
The claim that we're making is the Quran, with all these 10 authentic readings, is exactly the same as it was taught. It hasn't changed.
Well, but that's the difference.
Even
Taught. See the difference between the recitation
listen,
and
taught
the
and transmitted. Taught and transmitted. Can you find? I can provide to you from manuscripts from 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th centuries of our readings of the Quran, going all the way back. What J. Smith didn't do and didn't tell you, he didn't tell you that, did he look at other manuscripts?
Of course he did. Come on. He's got a PhD
In what? In what?
Theology, isn't it?
No,
Religion or
no,
whatever.
try again.
He's got a PhD.
In what?
In something to do with religion.
He doesn't have PhD in Islamic studies. He doesn't have PhD in Quran. He doesn't have PhD in manuscripts. What he has a PhD is a certain missionary. Listen, sister. He has a PhD. Okay. Let me give you an analogy and tell you what his PhD is. Imagine now, this brother did a PhD on J. Smith. His method, his missionary method. How is?
You know that J. Smith knows what he's talking about.
Excuse me, please listen. If this gentleman did it, Akhi, please, Jazak Allah Khair. If this gentleman did a PhD on J. Smith about his life, that he used
How did we
to.
get to this conversation?
Excuse me, sister, you're not even trying to engage with the topic at hand. I'll talk about the PhD he did. If this gentleman did a PhD on the life of J. Smith, how he preached, how he engaged with the Muslims, would you then say he's a scholar of the Bible? Of course not. J. Smith, unfortunately, did a PhD on a certain individual called Carl Funder, a missionary in India. His life, his works, how he actually did his preaching. That is how he's got his PhD. He has nothing to do with Islam, Quran, Hadith, or any of the Quranic
I
manuscripts.
disagree, but yeah.
I have his PhD with me. Do you want to have a look at it? I'll show it to
Where
you.
is it? From where?
From his university, he did his PhD.
Okay.
So his PhD is not something on the Quran.
He doesn't only have a PhD, right? He might have some more education than just a PhD.
What education?
I'm just asking.
From us, yes, we have educated him enough, but he doesn't learn. So as you now realize, people make noises, and they tell you only half the truth.
Okay.
Let me
Like
show
you're
you.
telling me now, like you're telling me half the truth now.
Excuse me, I don't lie, and let me show you something. Like, look. You see, these are the examples that he raised last week, right? Apparently, this word is added. What he didn't tell you, that we have many other
All right,
manuscripts.
but look, go back. Look. Can you see where there's no? I'm not just talking about that. But look,
This word,
No, but-
later insertion.
I'm not just talking about that. Can we ignore that just for a second? Can you not see the other words underneath there that's been written over, or you can't see it?
Listen, I can read the script.
All right, thanks.
Excuse me, sister, come on, come on.
Can't see it.
Let him
Can you see
explain.
it?
Look,
Let him explain.
sister.
Can you see it?
Listen. Excuse
Can you
me.
see it though?
Listen,
Can
sister.
you see the words?
Listen to me.
Then we're not showing that.
Listen to me. I am showing to you. Look here. This word has been later added, right? Because the scribe omitted it. Now
But
this.
that's not the same thing as being written over.
Listen.
It's not the same thing.
All right, thanks.
Why are you afraid of the truth? You're afraid of the truth. This is the evidence.
But you're not listening to what she's saying.
She's running away from discussing this.
I'm trying to say that we're not just talking about the word that's been inserted.
No, I have.
No, but no.
Listen.
Can you see?
Haven't let me talk yet.
Okay,
The
look.
word's
Look.
been written over.
How many examples have I got here?
The word's been literally
Look.
split off,
How many
written over.
examples have I got here? All his examples. All of them. Erasures and substitution, whatever.
What it is, you will always have an
sorry.
explanation. You know, you've been talking
No.
about...
What I'm showing to you,
You've been talking to me
the
about
errors
something and I can't speak.
of
Do you understand?
sister. I was demonstrating to you that he's not telling the whole story. When you pick up any examples, any examples, I can give you other manuscripts from the same time period and before, which has what is claimed to be a correction. He hasn't done that. So what has been, he is hiding the truth.
That I don't come to that conclusion. If one has got an example of being overwritten, that doesn't negate everything.
Okay, brother, 1 second. If I give you now a biblical manuscript in which there is a correction, are you saying that was the original? Then they be consistent then. Scribes
No, that's
have
the-
written,
no.
a scribe have made
The
mistakes.
argument doesn't work there.
Sister,
The argument,
sister.
You're saying if there's 10 and only 2 have...
No, not two. There's never a two. There's never a two. There's only the one on, one out. Only one on, one out. So why is it that
Jay Smith's got more than one. Come on.
J. Smith?
He's shown you more than one example, isn't it? Of the Quran being
Look.
written over in the books in Cairo, right?
This book is what was talking about, right?
Yeah.
I have the book and all the examples, and I have more other examples.
Good for you.
Not good for me. This is a blatant refutation of this ignorance. People don't learn. What can I do?
I'm a beginner in
Yeah,
speaking
but
Spanish, so-
don't be misled by people who are misleading people.
What you're trying to say is like it takes more than just like